The evening sky had deepened into a rich shade of indigo as Sarah Chen's taxi rolled to a stop in front of the Grand Plaza Hotel. The towering structure loomed before her, its illuminated windows twinkling like stars in the city's heart. The hotel was a beacon of luxury, a magnificent building that seemed to pulse with elegance and exclusivity. Sarah, a successful businesswoman in her mid-30s, had just completed a long international flight from Hong Kong to New York. Exhausted from the nearly 16-hour journey, she was more than ready to rest. As the taxi driver helped her with her suitcases, Sarah could already feel the weight of the long day pulling at her. She paid him generously, slipping him a tip despite her weariness, showing the same kindness she always had, no matter the circumstances. Today, though, her appearance was a far cry from the usual image of a polished, high-powered CEO. Her tailored business suits, usually packed neatly for work trips, had been replaced with comfortable black leggings, a loose gray sweater and simple running shoes, clothes more suited for the journey than the business meeting awaiting her the following morning. Her long black hair was hastily tied into a messy bun, and her face was free of makeup, the exhaustion of the flight evident. Just a few more minutes, Sarah whispered to herself, the thought of a warm shower and a soft hotel bed keeping her going as she shuffled toward the revolving doors. The flight had been delayed by 2 hours, and she was already running behind on her preparations for the next day's crucial board meeting. As the CEO of Chin Technologies, she had transformed her small family business from its humble beginnings into a global tech empire worth billions. But despite all her success, tonight she felt like any other tired traveler, just hoping for a quiet, restful night before diving into another demanding day. The lobby of the Grand Plaza was as grand as its name. Crystal chandeliers hung from the soaring ceilings, casting a soft, golden light that reflected off the marble floors, creating an atmosphere of opulence. Well-dressed guests moved gracefully through the lobby, rolling designer luggage behind them, while staff in pristine uniforms scurried around, attending to their needs. Large floral arrangements, fresh and fragrant, filled the space with a welcoming scent. Sarah took a deep breath, appreciating the luxurious surroundings, but her tired eyes couldn't help but long for the quiet of her room. As she approached the check-in desk, Sarah's attention was momentarily diverted by a young couple standing at the counter. They were laughing together, dressed in clothes that clearly signaled they belonged to the hotel's elite clientele. The couple received their room keys and made their way toward the elevators, still sharing their laughter. Behind them, 2 businessmen in impeccable suits stood waiting their turn, absorbed in their phones, their eyes never leaving the screen. Sarah moved to the back of the line, pulling up her booking confirmation on her phone. She tried to stifle a yawn as the minutes dragged by, the clock above the reception desk ticking toward 11:30 p.m. The fatigue weighed heavily on her, but there was little choice but to press on. Tomorrow's meeting would require her full attention, and there were still documents to review before she could rest. I'll order room service and go through them quickly, she thought, knowing full well that sleep would have to wait a little longer. As she stood there, her thoughts shifted to her father. He would have been so proud of how far their company had come. He had started the tech business 30 years ago in a small garage, fixing computers for local businesses, and now she was here, poised to sign a deal that would take Chin Technologies to the next level. A small smile tugged at her lips as she recalled the long road from that garage to the boardrooms and luxury hotels. The line moved forward slowly, and Sarah shifted her weight from one foot to the other, feeling the ache in her legs after sitting for hours in the cramped economy class seats. It was a habit she had never shaken, even as her company grew. Success shouldn't change who you are, her father had always told her, and she carried those words with her. No matter the luxury that surrounded her now, she still made the effort to fly economy. Through the lobby's large windows, Sarah could see the glittering lights of New York City. There was always something about the city that energized her, but tonight the exhaustion was winning. Her phone buzzed again with unread emails and messages demanding her attention. But for once she decided to let them wait. Tomorrow she would address them all, but tonight she simply needed to rest. Finally, it was her turn at the reception desk. Sarah stepped forward, rolling her small suitcases behind her. She smiled politely at the young receptionist, ready to check in, still maintaining her professional demeanor despite the weariness that tugged at her. However, what she didn't know was that this seemingly routine check-in was about to turn into a moment that would change both her life and the life of the receptionist, who would unknowingly make a judgment that would spark a firestorm of controversy. The receptionist, Mark Thompson, had only been working at the Grand Plaza for 3 days. At 24 years old, he considered himself lucky to have landed what he saw as his dream job. His supervisor had praised him earlier for being extra cautious about hotel security, which made him feel important. He stood straighter, trying to project professionalism as Sarah approached the desk. However, Mark quickly noticed her casual attire, and a judgment formed almost instantly. He scanned her outfit, worn running shoes, leggings, and a messy bun. Everything about her looked out of place compared to the usual guests at the Grand Plaza, where rooms started at $500 per night. Mark adjusted his uniform tie and straightened his back. He cleared his throat before addressing Sarah, his voice louder than necessary. "Are you sure you're at the right hotel, madam?" he asked, the words carrying across the grand lobby. Several nearby guests turned to look, the tension in the air palpable. Mark emphasized the word exclusive, his eyes briefly scanning Sarah's attire before looking pointedly at her clothes. Sarah blinked, caught off guard by the question. "Yes, I'm certain." "Here's my booking confirmation," she said, pulling her phone from her pocket and showing him the confirmation email. Mark glanced at it briefly but didn't make much effort to read it. "Anyone can show a screenshot," he dismissed with a wave of his hand. "We've had incidents of people trying to sneak in lately." His voice grew louder as he continued speaking, his tone increasingly patronizing. More heads turned in the lobby, the guests now fully aware of the scene unfolding. Sarah's cheeks flushed with a mix of surprise and embarrassment, her tiredness momentarily forgotten as she tried to make sense of the situation. She had experienced prejudice in various forms before, subtle looks or assumptions made based on her appearance, but this was different. This was overt, a clear judgment based solely on how she looked in comparison to the usual Grand Plaza clientele. Sarah's professional demeanor faltered, but she quickly regained composure. She had dealt with difficult situations in her career before, but this, she realized, was an entirely new challenge, one that would test her character, leadership, and ability to turn a negative experience into something positive. And little did she know, this simple exchange at the check-in desk would soon go viral, becoming a flashpoint in a national conversation about prejudice, appearance-based discrimination, and how we judge one another based on outward appearances. The situation in the lobby was escalating. Some guests, sensing drama unfolding, had begun to pull out their phones, their cameras focused on the exchange between Sarah Chen and the receptionist. Sarah, still calm despite the public spectacle, could feel the heat rising in her cheeks, not from embarrassment but from a deep, simmering anger at the unfair treatment she was receiving. She had faced challenges before but never anything like this. The unfairness of it all was unbearable, and she knew that if she didn't assert herself now, this moment could spiral out of control, both for her and the man responsible. Mark Thompson, the young receptionist, was oblivious to the growing tide of attention as he continued his line of questioning. "Are you sure you're at the right hotel, ma'am?" he asked again, his voice loud enough for several nearby guests to hear. His tone was dripping with condescension as he scanned her casual appearance, her leggings, running shoes, and messy bun. Sarah stood tall, trying to keep her frustration in check. "I have a reservation under Sarah Chen, CEO of Chen Technologies. I'm here for a board meeting tomorrow morning," Sarah explained, her voice steady despite the exhaustion and disbelief building inside her. She could feel the weight of the entire lobby's gaze on her as Mark continued to dismiss her presence. Mark barely glanced at the screen of her phone when she offered her booking confirmation. Instead, he made an exaggerated mocking laugh, rolling his eyes as he emphasized the words CEO of Chen Technologies, making air quotes with his fingers as if the title were something to be ridiculed. The few nearby guests who had been quietly watching the exchange gasped in surprise, and Sarah's blood began to boil. "Ma'am, I know what CEOs look like," Mark said with a dismissive sneer. "They don't usually show up looking like they just came from the gym," he added, his voice loud enough to draw the attention of everyone in the lobby. The tension in the air became palpable. A couple of teenage girls standing off to the side were already streaming the interaction live on their phones, the feed filling up with viewers who were eager to witness whatever drama was unfolding. The scene had gone from an uncomfortable check-in process to an impromptu spectacle of public shaming, and Sarah could hear the murmur of voices around her. Sarah's cheeks flushed, not with embarrassment but with a deep, rising anger. She had built an empire, leading a company that spanned multiple continents. But none of that seemed to matter in this moment. "I just finished a 14-hour flight," she replied, her voice calm but firm. "Please check your system for my reservation." She stood her ground, refusing to let Mark's dismissiveness push her any further into a corner. Mark, however, was intent on making a spectacle of her. Rather than checking the system, he reached for his phone under the desk. "I'm calling security," he declared, his voice dripping with authority. "We can't have people trying to scam their way into rooms." He pressed a button on his desk phone, speaking with exaggerated importance. "Security to the front desk, please," he called out. The well-dressed couple who had checked in earlier, standing nearby, whispered loudly enough for Sarah to hear. "How embarrassing for her," one of them muttered, their tone dripping with judgment. Sarah felt the sting of their words but remained composed. She had never faced such blatant discrimination in any hotel she had stayed at. Never had she been so openly judged by her appearance, especially in an establishment that prided itself on catering to the elite. Moments later, 2 security guards appeared at the entrance to the lobby, their heavy footsteps echoing across the marble floor. Mark, seeing them, pointed directly at Sarah. "This woman is claiming to be a CEO and trying to check in," he said, his voice rising again. "She doesn't have proper identification and her appearance is suspicious." Sarah's heart raced, but she refused to back down. She reached into her bag to retrieve her passport and business cards, determined to prove her identity. But before she could offer them, Mark raised his hand, signaling for her to stop. "Please step away from the desk, ma'am," he said curtly. "We have real guests waiting to check in." He gestured behind her, where a growing line of guests stood, their eyes now fixed on the unfolding drama. The security guards moved closer to Sarah, their presence intimidating. One of them, a tall man with a stern expression, stepped forward and reached for her suitcase. "Ma'am, please come with us," he said, his voice firm. The crowd around them had grown larger, their phones recording every moment. Sarah could hear whispers and murmurs rising from the onlookers as they watched the scene unfold. What had started as a simple check-in had now turned into a public spectacle, a humiliating incident that seemed to have no end. Sarah allowed herself to be led toward the exit, the clicking sounds of cameras and phones intensifying with each step she took. Some guests were laughing, others were shaking their heads in disbelief, but most were too passive to speak out. The same couple who had checked in earlier was now taking selfies with Sarah's eviction as the backdrop, their laughter punctuating the scene. "Wait till our friends see this," one of them giggled. As Sarah neared the automatic doors, she stopped. She turned to face Mark, and for a brief moment, the entire lobby fell silent, all eyes on her. The humiliation she had endured, the injustice of being judged so harshly, weighed heavily on her, but she refused to give him the satisfaction of a public outburst. Instead, with quiet dignity, she spoke. "You might want to Google the name Sarah Chen before you finish your shift tonight," she said calmly, her words cutting through the tension in the air. Mark, unimpressed, rolled his eyes dramatically. "Security, please remove her now," he ordered, already turning away. "And make sure to get a photo for our record so she can't try this again." He returned his focus to the next guest in line, clearly eager to move on from what he had dismissed as a simple case of a scammer trying to get a free stay. Just as Sarah was about to step outside into the cold New York night, a voice rang out from across the lobby. "Stop right there." The command was sharp and clear, freezing everyone in their tracks. A woman in a professional suit was hurrying towards Sarah, her heels clicking sharply on the marble floor. It was Linda Martinez, the hotel's general manager. She was sprinting toward the scene, her expression one of concern, disbelief, and anger as she reached Sarah's side. The entire lobby watched as Linda quickly assessed the situation, her eyes narrowing at Mark Thompson behind the desk. She had been briefed earlier in the evening about a high-profile guest, but nothing could have prepared her for what had just unfolded. "Is there a problem here?" Linda asked firmly, her gaze shifting between Mark and Sarah. The atmosphere in the lobby shifted once again, now filled with anticipation as the crowd waited to see how this new development would play out. The atmosphere in the lobby had shifted dramatically in just a few moments. Guests, once silently recording the humiliating scene unfolding before them, now stopped in their tracks as Linda Martinez, the senior manager of the Grand Plaza Hotel, rushed across the marble floor in high heels that clicked sharply with each step. Her usually composed appearance was slightly disheveled from the speed of her sprint, and as she reached Sarah, she was visibly out of breath. But there was no time to waste. She had recognized the woman being escorted out, and her expression was one of horror. As she approached, several other staff members quickly followed, their faces filled with disbelief as they realized what had been happening under their noses. The security guards, still standing in confusion, released Sarah's arm, unsure of what to do now that the manager was present. Mark, still at the reception desk, noticed the sudden shift in atmosphere but was utterly bewildered. He couldn't quite understand why the crowd's energy had changed so suddenly. His thoughts raced as Linda continued toward Sarah, already beginning to apologize profusely. The onlookers, sensing that the story was about to take an unexpected turn, began recording again, their phones pointing at the new development with the hope that they would catch the real drama unfolding. After all, they had just witnessed the humiliation of Sarah Chin, but now the situation seemed to be taking an unexpected twist. The night's real drama was only beginning, and it was clear that social media would soon explode with what would be dubbed #the Grand Plaza Incident. Linda reached Sarah just as she stood by the hotel's entrance, about to exit the building. The older woman's breath was still heavy from the sprint across the lobby, and her usually flawless appearance was a little disrupted from the frantic rush to correct what had just unfolded. The lobby fell into an eerie silence as Linda bowed slightly, her face flushed with embarrassment. "Miss Chin, I cannot begin to express how deeply sorry I am," she said, her voice trembling slightly, loud enough for everyone to hear. Please don't leave. This is your hotel." The words "your hotel" echoed through the now silent lobby, and the impact was immediate. Mark felt his stomach drop. He knew at that moment his life was about to change forever. Sarah slowly turned around, her posture as regal as ever, despite the fatigue and frustration that had been building up all night. Her eyes met the crowd that had gathered to witness her humiliation. The security guards had already taken a step back, their faces filled with confusion and growing realization that they had made a terrible mistake. James, the older guard, removed his cap and pressed it against his chest, standing there as though he wished the floor would swallow him whole. The realization was evident in his eyes, and he looked every bit as mortified as Mark. "Everyone, please allow me to introduce Miss Sarah Chin," Linda continued, her voice now shaking slightly. "She is not only the CEO of Chin Technologies but also the owner of the Grand Plaza Hotel." The words seemed to hit like a thunderclap. "She owns 35 luxury hotels across 4 continents, including this flagship property." The silence in the lobby was deafening. The couple who had been taking selfies just moments before quickly lowered their phones, their faces now burning with shame as they realized who they had been mocking. The group of business executives who had been lounging at the bar straightened their ties nervously, suddenly recognizing Sarah's name from recent Forbes articles. Mark, still behind the reception desk, felt his face turn ghostly white. His mind raced as the reality of the situation settled in. He gripped the edge of the desk as if it might somehow provide some support, but there was no escaping the enormity of his mistake. Linda, noticing the growing tension and confusion in the crowd, continued to explain. "Miss Chin regularly visits her properties unannounced to experience them as a regular guest would," she said. "It's part of her commitment to maintaining the highest standards of service." Linda then pointed to the massive digital billboard behind the reception desk, which now showcased Sarah's impressive list of achievements. Sarah Chin, the screen read, Forbes 40 Under 40, Hotel Industry Innovation Award winner, Philanthropist of the Year. The same screen where Mark had mockingly read Sarah's reservation details now displayed her entire empire, a far cry from the image Mark had painted of her just moments ago. Among the crowd, a young girl suddenly gasped. "Mom, she's the lady from my business textbook." The girl's voice was filled with excitement, and her mother turned to her in surprise. "We just studied about her last week," the girl continued, her eyes wide. "She started with one small hotel and built it into an empire." Heads turned as other onlookers exchanged looks of recognition. The shock was palpable, and Mark stood frozen, unable to comprehend the magnitude of his mistake. Sarah, standing quietly through it all, finally spoke. Her voice was calm but firm, carrying clearly across the now silent lobby. "Linda, please don't fire anyone over this incident," she said, her words cutting through the tension like a blade. Mark's head snapped up, hoping that he might escape the repercussions of his actions. But his brief sense of relief quickly evaporated. Sarah wasn't looking for revenge, she was looking for change. Instead of reprimanding Mark in front of everyone, Sarah turned her gaze toward him and spoke. "I think we need to have a serious discussion about how we treat all our guests, regardless of their appearance," she said. The words were powerful, and the crowd, once captivated by the drama, now realized they were witnessing something extraordinary. Phones were still recording, but now the purpose had shifted. Instead of capturing a scandal, they were now documenting a moment of leadership and grace. Linda nodded vigorously, clearly relieved that Sarah's response had been measured and constructive. She turned to the gathered crowd. "Ladies and gentlemen, on behalf of the Grand Plaza Hotel, I sincerely apologize for the unpleasant scene you've witnessed tonight," she said, her voice steady now. "This is not what we stand for, and Miss Chen's presence here will help us ensure it never happens again." The crowd, though still buzzing with disbelief, began to realize that they weren't just witnessing the exposure of Sarah's identity, they were witnessing the beginning of a transformative shift in the way this hotel, and perhaps the entire industry, would approach customer relations. Mark, unable to stay behind the desk any longer, finally stepped out. His legs felt like jelly, and he could feel the weight of every eye in the lobby trained on him. He walked toward Sarah, his head bowed in shame. "Miss Chen, I don't know what to say," he stammered. His earlier confidence had evaporated, leaving him at a loss for words. "I made terrible assumptions and behaved inexcusably." Sarah looked at him thoughtfully, her expression calm but piercing. She knew that by morning this incident would be viral, flooding social media with videos and posts. But instead of treating it as a PR crisis, she saw it as an opportunity for something much more significant. "Mr. Thompson," she said, her tone carrying both authority and the possibility of change. "Please join me in my office tomorrow at 9 a.m. We have much to discuss about the future of customer service in our hotels." Her words hung in the air, leaving everyone in the lobby wondering what would come next. As Linda began arranging for Sarah to check in properly, the crowd slowly dispersed, the tension beginning to ebb. The atmosphere in the lobby had completely transformed. They had not only witnessed the revelation of Sarah Chen's identity but also the beginning of what would be a revolutionary shift in how the hospitality industry treated its guests. The next morning, Sarah sat behind a large mahogany desk in her executive office at the Grand Plaza Hotel. The sun streamed through the floor-to-ceiling windows as she reviewed the chaos that had erupted overnight on social media. Her phone had not stopped buzzing since 5 a.m., filled with notifications from reporters, industry colleagues, and of course, thousands of social media users sharing their reactions to what had transpired the previous night. But instead of feeling the weight of a public scandal, Sarah felt the weight of an opportunity, one that could change the way hospitality was delivered forever. When the first news outlets picked up the story, the hashtags #hotel discrimination and #Grand Plaza incident began trending worldwide. The video clips from the previous night had gone viral, with millions of views across different platforms. Some clips showed Mark's rude and dismissive behavior, while others captured Sarah's poised and dignified response in the face of public humiliation. News channels ran the story on repeat, turning the incident into a national conversation about prejudice and discrimination within the hospitality industry. Linda Martinez, the senior manager, stood nervously by the window, her eyes trained on the growing crowd of reporters gathering outside the hotel's main entrance. The once serene lobby had transformed into a spectacle of media frenzy. "Miss Chin," Linda said, her voice tinged with anxiety as she scrolled through her tablet. "There are already 17 interview requests from major networks. And our customer service line is completely overwhelmed with calls." Sarah Chin, seated calmly at her desk, took a small sip of her green tea, her face serene despite the storm of chaos brewing around her. She remained unfazed by the onslaught of media attention and the growing firestorm on social media. Her computer screen displayed a constant stream of headlines, from hotel receptionist's biggest mistake, kicking out his own boss, to billionaire CEO humiliated at her own hotel. More sensational titles included discrimination in luxury hotels, a wake-up call, and luxury hotels must change. Despite the constant barrage of notifications, Sarah maintained her composure, her hands steady as she continued to navigate through the unfolding situation. It wasn't the first time she had faced public scrutiny, and it certainly wouldn't be the last. In her years as a business leader, she had learned to see beyond the immediate noise and focus on the bigger picture, on making a real, lasting change. At exactly 9 a.m., there was a soft knock on her office door, and Mark Thompson entered, looking like he hadn't slept a wink. His usually neat appearance was now rumpled, his shirt untucked and dark circles under his eyes betrayed the restless night he had spent. He had spent the hours since the incident reading everything he could find about Sarah Chin, piecing together her life story, and realizing with growing horror the magnitude of his mistake. "Please sit down, Mr. Thompson," Sarah said, gesturing to the chair across from her. Her voice was calm, offering no trace of the judgment or anger he had expected. Linda moved to stand behind Sarah, while the hotel's HR director, James Wilson, entered with a thick folder in his hands. Mark, his hands trembling slightly, pulled a resignation letter from his jacket pocket and placed it on the desk in front of Sarah. His voice was low, almost apologetic as he spoke. "Miss Chin, I've prepared my resignation letter. I understand if you want to make an example of me." Sarah didn't immediately reach for the envelope. Instead, she turned her computer screen around, showing Mark the viral storm that had erupted on social media. "Do you see these comments, Mr. Thompson?" she asked calmly, her eyes never leaving his. "Many people are calling for your immediate termination. Some are demanding that we shut down the hotel for sensitivity training. Others are sharing their own stories of discrimination in luxury establishments. Mark's face grew even paler with each passing word. The weight of his actions was suffocating, and he felt a deep sense of regret for his behavior the previous night. He had treated a guest, his boss no less, with complete disrespect, and now the world was watching. But then Sarah did something that Mark didn't expect. She smiled, and the tension in the room seemed to lessen. "I don't see this as a crisis, Mr. Thompson," she said, her voice unwavering. "I see it as an opportunity. Not just for you but for all of us." Mark swallowed hard, unsure of what to make of her words. He had braced himself for a confrontation, for Sarah to fire him on the spot and make an example of him to the press. Instead, she was offering him a chance to grow. "Tell me," Sarah continued, her tone shifting slightly. "What have you learned from reading about me last night?" Mark, still a bit shaken, cleared his throat. "I learned that you started as a housekeeper in your father's small motel," he began, his voice gaining strength as he spoke. "You worked every position from cleaning rooms to serving breakfast, before eventually transforming it into the Grand Plaza chain. But you never forgot your humble beginnings?" Sarah nodded, a small smile tugging at the corner of her lips. "What else?" she prompted. Mark took a deep breath, his eyes focused on the floor before meeting her gaze again. "I also learned that you still fly economy class sometimes," he said. "You make surprise visits to your hotels dressed as a regular guest to ensure that everyone receives the same high-quality service. You believe luxury isn't about appearance but about how we treat people." Linda and James exchanged surprised glances. They hadn't expected this turn in the conversation. Mark's understanding of Sarah's values was a step in the right direction, and it was clear he had done his research. Sarah was pleased with his response. "Correct," she said, her voice steady but kind. "Now, instead of accepting your resignation, I have a different proposition for you." She opened a folder on her desk and Mark's eyes widened. Sarah leaned forward slightly, locking eyes with him. "We're going to turn this incident into a teaching moment," she said. "I want you to help me develop a new training program for all our hotels worldwide." Mark blinked, his mind racing. "Me?" he whispered as if he couldn't believe what he was hearing. "Yes, you," Sarah confirmed. "Who better to talk about the dangers of prejudice than someone who learned its lesson so publicly? But first, you'll work in every department of this hotel, from housekeeping to kitchen staff. Just as I did. You'll learn that every guest, every employee has their own story. You'll understand that hospitality isn't just about luxury. It's about respect, compassion, and dignity for every person, no matter their appearance or status." The tension in the room began to lift. Linda's phone continued to buzz with media requests, and James exchanged a look with Sarah, impressed by her calm and strategic approach. They all knew that they were witnessing something more important than a scandal unfolding. They were seeing the beginning of real change. "Mr. Thompson," Sarah concluded, "are you ready to turn your biggest mistake into your greatest opportunity for growth?" Mark straightened in his chair, hope replacing the shame that had clouded his eyes just moments earlier. He nodded slowly, realizing that this was a chance to prove himself and make amends for his actions. The next few months would challenge everything he thought he knew about luxury service and human dignity. 2 weeks after the viral incident, Mark found himself in a different kind of meeting room at the Grand Plaza Hotel. The luxurious executive office was replaced by a simple staff training room. The walls were adorned with photos documenting the hotel's history, and at the center was a large picture of a young Sarah Chin in a housekeeper's uniform, smiling as she made a bed. Today was special. Sarah had arranged for all hotel staff to attend a personal story session, something she rarely shared publicly. The room was packed with employees from every department: housekeepers, kitchen staff, maintenance workers, and front desk personnel. Mark sat in the front row, his notebook ready, his appearance much humbler than it had been just 2 weeks ago. "I wasn't born into luxury," Sarah began, standing casually in front of the group in jeans and a simple blouse. She clicked to show a photo of a modest building with a flickering neon sign. "My father ran a small roadside motel with just 15 rooms. That's where I learned the most important lessons about hospitality." The room fell silent as Sarah shared stories from her childhood, about helping her father unclog toilets at midnight, about cleaning rooms in the blistering summer heat, and about dealing with difficult guests who looked down on her family. One day, she continued, a guest arrived in a beautiful Mercedes, wearing an expensive suit, and treated them like they were beneath him. But the next guest, who arrived in a rusty old truck, wearing worn-out clothes, turned out to be a famous food critic, Sarah said. "He gave our small motel restaurant its first major review because my father treated him with the same respect he showed everyone." Mark wrote furiously in his notebook, the parallels between his own behavior and the story she was telling striking him deeply. With his own actions weighing heavily on him, Mark Thompson sat quietly, reflecting on everything that had transpired over the past 2 weeks. Around him, other staff members nodded in agreement with Sarah's words, some wiping away tears as they absorbed her personal story. Sarah continued, her voice steady and clear as she shared her journey from humble beginnings to becoming the CEO of the Grand Plaza hotel chain. I wasn't born into luxury, Sarah began, her tone warm yet resolute. She clicked through a series of photos, each one telling a part of her story. The first image was of a modest roadside motel, a small building with just 15 rooms, where her father worked tirelessly to keep things running. This was my father's motel, Sarah continued, and it was where I learned the most important lessons about hospitality. It wasn't about luxury, it was about people. The staff listened intently, captivated by Sarah's ability to frame her rise as something more than a business success. It was a story about empathy and respect. As Sarah moved on, she shared a picture of herself as a young college student, balancing multiple jobs while pursuing a business degree. The photos showed her in various uniforms: waitress, receptionist, cleaning staff. Each job, she explained, taught her something valuable. The housekeeper knows more about our guests' needs than anyone else, Sarah said, her voice softening as she reflected on the people who had shaped her career. The maintenance worker understands the building better than any manager. They are the heart of this operation. Mark sat up straighter, fully engaged now. He had come to realize the depth of his mistake, but hearing Sarah's story, her journey from housekeeper to CEO, made him understand the core principles that had guided her all along. It wasn't just about what a guest saw when they walked into the hotel, it was about how they felt when they walked through the door. Then came the pictures of her father's illness, a time when Sarah had to take over the motel at just 23 years old. We were nearly bankrupt, she revealed, her voice heavy with emotion. But our regular guests helped us survive, not because of our luxury, we had none, but because of how we made them feel. They felt respected, valued, and welcomed regardless of their appearance or wealth. Mark's cheeks burned with shame as he thought about his own behavior 2 weeks ago. He had treated a guest, his boss no less, with arrogance and disdain, and now, hearing Sarah's words, he saw how wrong he had been. But Sarah wasn't done with her story. She showed the transformation of that small motel into their first real hotel, sharing pictures of the struggles and sacrifices involved. We took loans, worked 18-hour days, and slowly built our reputation, she continued. I still worked every position, learning every detail. She smiled at the maintenance staff in the room. I can still fix a leaky faucet if needed. The room laughed, the tension breaking as Sarah's humility shone through. But then Sarah turned serious again. Success tested us in new ways, she said. As we grew more luxurious, some of our staff began judging guests by their appearance. We lost sight of my father's most important lesson. Every person who walks through our doors deserves respect. She looked directly at Mark as she spoke, her gaze steady. Mr. Thompson's mistake 2 weeks ago was painful, but it reminded us why we're here. Luxury isn't about marble floors or crystal chandeliers. It's about making everyone feel valued. Mark stood up, his voice shaking but clear. I've spent the past 2 weeks working in housekeeping, he shared, his eyes scanning the room. Yesterday I cleaned 15 rooms. I learned more about guest service from Maria, our head housekeeper, than I ever did in hotel management school. Sarah nodded approvingly, her expression proud. That's exactly why I still make surprise visits dressed casually, she explained. It's not to trick anyone, it's to ensure we never forget our roots and our purpose. As the session came to an end, Sarah revealed her new initiative for the hotel chain. Every new employee, regardless of position, will work in each department for at least a week, she announced. Understanding builds respect, she explained, and respect is the true meaning of luxury. The staff, deeply moved by Sarah's words, gave her a standing ovation. Mark remained seated, his eyes fixed on his notes. He had written just one sentence that summed up everything he had learned over the past 2 weeks. True luxury is treating everyone like they own the hotel, even if they look like they can't afford a room. 6 months after the infamous incident, the Grand Plaza Hotel had transformed in ways nobody could have predicted. Mark stood in front of a large training room, but this time he wasn't a participant. He was the lead trainer for the hotel's new Respect First program. Behind him, a screen displayed the viral video of his mistake, which had now become a powerful teaching tool. This was me, Mark said to the group of new employees from various Grand Plaza hotels across the country. I was that person who thought luxury meant treating people differently based on how they looked. He paused, letting his words sink in. I was completely wrong. The room was filled with staff members from different hotels, all part of Sarah Chen's new initiative. Every employee, from bellhops to managers, now had to complete this special training program. The most surprising part? Mark's sessions had become the most requested and highly rated across all hotels in the chain. Let me show you what happened last week, Mark continued, switching to a new video. The footage showed a young woman in sweatpants and a baseball cap entering one of the Grand Plaza hotels. The new receptionist, trained under the new program, greeted her warmly and provided excellent service. The woman turned out to be a famous movie star, who later tweeted about her wonderful experience at the hotel. But Mark was quick to emphasize, that's not the point. The point is that it shouldn't matter who they are. Every guest deserves the same respect. In the back of the room, Sarah sat quietly, watching her former critic become her strongest advocate. She smiled, remembering how Mark had spent his first month working in every department. Cleaning rooms, carrying luggage, washing dishes, and fixing air conditioners. She was proud of how far he had come. The training session continued with role-playing exercises that Mark had developed. These scenarios, based on real situations, had been designed to help employees understand how to provide service without prejudice. Remember, Mark said, walking between the groups, Chin started as a housekeeper. Our head chef used to be a dishwasher. I was a judgmental receptionist who learned the hard way. Your position doesn't define your worth, and neither does a guest's appearance. During the lunch break, Sarah received an email from Forbes magazine. They wanted to feature the Grand Plaza's transformation in their next issue. The viral incident that had threatened to damage the hotel's reputation had instead sparked a revolution in the hospitality industry. Other hotel chains had begun to adopt Grand Plaza's new training program, and the hashtag #RespectFirst had replaced hashtag hotel discrimination in social media conversations. The Grand Plaza's bookings had actually increased, with many guests specifically mentioning the hotel's inclusive approach as the reason for their choice. Mark's afternoon session focused on practical changes the hotel had made. We've removed dress codes from our lobby areas, he explained. We've installed comfortable seating where anyone can rest, even if they're not guests. The staff now wears badges that show all the departments they've trained in, promoting understanding and respect among colleagues. We even changed our hiring process. Mark paused for a moment, letting the weight of his words settle in. We no longer require formal hospitality degrees for many positions. Instead, we look for people who demonstrate empathy and respect. We can teach hotel skills, but we can't teach kindness. As the training session came to a close, Sarah stood up to address the group. The room fell silent as she walked to the front. 6 months ago, she began, her voice calm but powerful. Mr. Thompson made a mistake that could have ended his career. Instead, he helped us create something remarkable. She revealed the latest numbers. Customer satisfaction scores had risen by 40%. The staff erupted into applause, and Mark stood at the front, his heart full of gratitude and humility, knowing that his journey was only just beginning. Employee retention at the Grand Plaza Hotel had improved by 60%. The hotel's social media sentiment, once full of criticism, had completely transformed from negative to overwhelmingly positive. But Sarah Chen, the CEO, was quick to remind her team that the most important change wasn't captured in these numbers. She addressed the gathered staff and leaders with a calm but powerful message. The most significant shift we've experienced is in the stories, she said, her voice steady but full of emotion. The homeless person who was treated with dignity when he just needed to use our bathroom. The celebrity who felt comfortable walking and wearing pajamas. The elderly couple who felt valued, even though they couldn't afford our best rooms. These stories, these moments of kindness, are what truly define us now. Mark Thompson, who had once been the embodiment of judgment and elitism, nodded in agreement. We're not just a luxury hotel anymore, he added, his voice gaining strength. We're a place where respect comes first, regardless of who you are or what you're wearing. As the training session concluded, Sarah gave the participants their first assignments. Each would spend the next week working in a department outside their hired position. Some of the managers shifted uncomfortably at the thought of cleaning rooms or washing dishes, but Mark couldn't help but smile, remembering his own journey. Trust me, he said with a hint of humor. Those rooms and dishes will teach you more about hospitality than any luxury training ever could. Outside, the hotel's new motto, Grand Plaza Hotel, where everyone is a VIP*, was proudly displayed in elegant letters. It had been Mark's idea, inspired by his own transformation from someone who judged guests by their appearance to someone who truly understood that luxury begins with respect. It was a motto that now symbolized not just the hotel's physical transformation, but the cultural shift within its walls. A year after the viral incident, the Grand Plaza Hotel's main ballroom was packed with journalists, hotel industry leaders, and employees from all levels. The occasion was the first annual Hospitality Without Borders conference, an event that had grown from one receptionist's mistake into a worldwide movement for change in the hotel industry. Sarah stood at the podium, wearing a simple black dress rather than an expensive designer outfit, symbolizing her commitment to humility. Behind her, a giant screen showed the hotel's transformation over the past year, but the most powerful image was the split-screen video. On one side was Mark Thompson's infamous interaction from a year ago, the moment that had sparked it all. On the other side was a video of the same lobby today, where guests of all appearances were being treated with equal respect and warmth. "A year ago we went viral for the wrong reasons," Sarah began, her voice carrying across the silent room. "Today we're viral for all the right ones." She clicked to show recent social media posts, guests sharing stories of exceptional service, celebrities praising the hotel's inclusive atmosphere, and countless testimonials from people who had previously felt unwelcome in luxury hotels. In the front row, Mark Thompson sat proudly, wearing his new uniform with a badge that read Chief of Guest Experience and Inclusion Training. His journey, once filled with arrogance and judgment, had become a case study in business schools across the country. Next to him sat Maria, the head housekeeper who had taught him humility, now promoted to Director of Staff Development. "Our revenue has increased by 50%, Sarah continued, but that's not what makes me proud. What makes me proud is that we've changed the definition of luxury hospitality." She gestured to the back of the room, where her father's old motel sign hung as a reminder of their humble beginnings. The presentation displayed photographs from the past year, images of a famous rock star checking in wearing pajamas, an elderly couple being treated like royalty in the lobby, and a group of backpackers receiving the same service as business executives. Each image told a story of inclusion and respect, not based on appearance or status, but on the inherent dignity of every guest. Mark took the stage next, his confidence now coming from experience rather than arrogance. "A year ago, I judged a guest by her appearance," he admitted, looking around the room with a quiet, reflective gaze. "Today I train people to see beyond appearances. We've hosted CEOs who arrived on bicycles, celebrities in sweatpants, and everyday heroes who saved up for years to stay with us. Each one received the same VIP treatment." The hotel's new training program, which had been adopted by over 200 hotels worldwide, was now regarded as a model of excellence. The Respect First manual, co-written by Mark and Sarah, had become required reading in hospitality schools across the country. But Sarah and Mark both agreed that the most significant change lay not in the big corporate deals or awards but in the small, everyday interactions. Sarah shared the story of a recent incident that exemplified the new ethos of the hotel. A young student had walked in, drenched from the rain, just needing directions. The same lobby where Sarah had once been humiliated now became a place of refuge. The staff offered her a towel, a hot chocolate, and proper directions. No questions asked about whether she was a guest, Sarah recounted, her eyes bright with pride. "This is the new face of luxury," she declared. "Not marble floors or crystal chandeliers, but the luxury of being treated with dignity regardless of your appearance or background." As the conference came to a close, Sarah made a surprising announcement. The Grand Plaza Hotel was launching a scholarship program for underprivileged students interested in hospitality careers. The first recipient? The daughter of a housekeeper who had worked at Sarah's father's old motel. It was a full-circle moment for Sarah, seeing the legacy of her father's values carried on in such a meaningful way. The event ended with a flurry of questions from journalists, who crowded around Mark asking about his transformation. "What's the biggest lesson you learned?" one reporter asked. Mark looked at Sarah, then at Maria before answering thoughtfully. "I learned that true luxury isn't about keeping people out," he said, his voice filled with humility. "It's about welcoming them in. Every person who walks through those doors has a story, and it's not our job to judge that story based on their appearance." Outside the hotel, the old signs of exclusivity had been replaced with a new message. "Welcome all, respect always." The lobby that had once been a scene of discrimination had now become a symbol of change in the hospitality industry. The hotel had transformed from a symbol of elitism to a beacon of inclusivity and respect. Sarah's final words at the conference summed up their journey. "A year ago, a mistake taught us our most valuable lesson," she said. "Today that lesson has become our greatest strength." In our hotels, everyone is a VIP, not because of what they wear, what they own, or who they are, but simply because they are human beings deserving of respect. As the conference attendees departed, they passed by a new addition to the hotel's entrance, a small plaque with a simple message: "Judge not by appearance, for every guest carries a story worth hearing." Below it, in smaller letters, was an inscription: "Inspired by a moment that changed us all, Grand Plaza Hotel 2024. This plaque, like everything else, symbolized the hotel's renewed commitment to kindness, empathy, and respect, a commitment that had changed not just the Grand Plaza but the entire hospitality industry.